At Arizona State University, we're bringing world-class education from our globally acclaimed faculty to you. Ranked #1 in innovation for 10 consecutive years and #2 among public universities for employability, ASU isn't just ahead of the curve, it's creating new paths to success. Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online, that's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
Having a life scholarship and being able to afford to go to college made me feel inspired to go.
When I got a life scholarship, it was such a relief.
I knew that I wanted to have an impact. Having a life scholarship through the SC Education Lottery was huge. It gave me the opportunity to make that impact right here at home.
The South Carolina Education Lottery. A better you, a better us, a better South Carolina. Visit sceducationlottery.com/betteryou.
Coming from the wild, from the rain and the stone, where the wind has no name and the traveler's alone. There's warmth in the fire and truth in the tale of the watcher who walks where the bold-hearted fail. He carries no sword, yet the darkness gives way to the lantern he lifts at the end of the day. He stands on the watchtower, still and unswayed, where the lost find a path through the fog and the fray. Pilgrims Grey, oh steward of lands, you carry the light in your weather-worn hands. A tale at the hearth, a guide through the night. You open the gate between the wrong and the right.
Our singers, great job. Thank you for welcoming us to the inn and out of the rain and the thunder, which it literally is doing outside my window at the moment, just beyond my keyboard and window over here. Wasn't supposed to do that. I don't know if anybody of you has noticed, but the wind and weather and rain and thunder changes seemingly by the hour. Every time I check my weather app, it's something new. I can't even trust my weather app. So, what are we covering today? Well, you have wandered into the Watchtower once more. This is Pilgrims Grey Chronicles, and I'm your host, Robert Clark. What is up? I'd like to say, as an introduction, in regards to the USS Liberty, that her flag flew high above her deck, sunlit, proud, and on June 8, 1967, soaked in the blood of her own sons. That is what we're covering today. Tonight, we break the silence on a story long buried beneath diplomatic niceties, media erasure, and presidential betrayal. The story of the USS Liberty. This isn't just a military tragedy, it is a national wound. It is a scar with 34 names carved into it. American sailors, sons, husbands killed in cold calculation by a supposed ally. But there's more to it than that. Way more. It wasn't confusion. It wasn't friendly fire. It was intentional, documented, and then denied. And for 58 years, those in power have hoped that you would never hear what really happened until now. And so, the lantern friends, light them, step inside, and let's remember the USS Liberty together. We have 8 segments tonight on this, each one of them roughly 5 to 10 minutes long, depending on how fast I read. Yeah. And so I will do my best to read, but I want to do justice to this because it truly is a tragic story and it is timely because of what's going on right now with our current warfare and attacks going on. So June 1967, the world was tense, In America, race riots exploded across urban centers. The Vietnam War raged without direction. 10,000 American troops would die that year, and the country was fraying. But across the sea, in the shimmering waters of the Mediterranean, the USS Liberty glided forward, silent and listening. Not a battleship, not a combat cruiser. The Liberty was a spy ship. A converted World War II freighter, lightly armed, bristling with antenna, a Cold War ear in a sea of fire. And she had just under 300 men aboard. Many were kids from small towns with sunburnt necks, calloused hands. Some were linguists, some were communications officers. All of them were unprepared for what was coming. Jim Cavanaugh, USS Liberty crewman. We were spies. That's what we did. We intercepted Morse code, embassy chatter, military movements, even police frequencies. With the kind of hardware they had on that ship, even in those days, yeah. Just imagine what they have today. And Lloyd Painter. We could receive anything. Low band, high band, bounce signals off the moon back to NSA within seconds. And yet, despite all that tech, the ship's soul was simple: clean quarters, air conditioning, strong morale, because you had to keep all that equipment nice and cool. Just boys in uniform doing their job. A quote from Bob Wilson, NSA: "It was laid back, clean, morale was high, the crew was sharp. We weren't worried. We had the American flag flying, standard colors." And the holiday colors, a massive stars and stripes that could be seen for miles. Unmistakable for anybody who knows the holiday colors. As the Liberty crept off the coast of Egypt, war erupted on land. It was called the Six-Day War, as we all know. Israel, Egypt, Jordan, and Syria all engaged in a furious regional battle, but Israel had already told the U.S. they wouldn't start it, and that was a lie. In an Al Jazeera report, in a NSA source, quote, "On June 5th, Israel jammed radar at the U.S. Embassy in Tel Aviv right before launching a surprise airstrike on Egypt." The Liberty was not part of the fight, but she was there to watch it, and maybe that was the problem. I think it was more than that, but we're just getting started. At 5:15 a.m., the Liberty was buzzed by an Israeli reconnaissance plane, and they knew. Al Jazeera later confirmed through released Israeli logs that the plane correctly identified the ship by the hull number, GTR-5, and confirmed it was an American Navy intelligence vessel. John Scott, the damage control officer, was quoted as saying, "We waved. We waved at the Israeli pilots. They waved back. We thought we were safe. We were their allies. Why would they think anything different?" Right? They saw Israeli aircraft. They probably felt safe. An entire morning, Israeli aircraft flew over the Liberty repeatedly, low, slow, observant. Members of the crew would testify they were doing half-moon passes over us. They had everything, all our tech. We gave it to them, and yet I felt secure. We all did. They weren't hiding. They weren't drifting. They were in international waters, 12 and a half miles from the Egyptian coast, with a flag as large as a sail snapping in the wind, with the ship's name clearly stenciled on the hull. They were not a mystery. They were not mistaken. They were targeted. Now, moments before 1:50 p.m., the sun is high, the crewmen are sunbathing on deck, others are napping, eating, cleaning their gear. As stated by Jim Smith in Damage Control, quote, "It was a beautiful day, blue skies, calm seas. 5 minutes after lunch, roughly, the jets came, and everything changed." And what happens next is not war, it was an execution. You could hear the low rumble of jet engines fading, and at 1:53 p.m., Israeli pilots call into base to ask about the ship. Their audio was later recovered. during an investigation. Quote, the USS Liberty was the only ship of any size in the area. It was known, documented, verified, and still the order was given. And within seconds, the sky rips open. Mirage and Mystere jets, unmarked, began diving on the Liberty. They unleashed napalm, rockets, and heavy machine gun fire. The flag is struck, antennas shattered, men are burned alive before they can reach their stations. The two sailors I was just speaking to, they were blown to mist that fast, according to Phil Turney, survivor. According to other crew testimony, every antenna gone in 3 seconds. 450 caliber machine guns wiped out. We could not even shoot back. They were left blind, burning and bleeding, and the fire was only beginning. Interesting that they targeted the antenna first, right? Definitely did not want to get any report or message out from this ship with what was going on. So, you don't know what it feels like until it happens. 1 minute you're eating lunch, the next the sky catches fire and your crewmates are ash. And so the strike begins. 1:53 p.m., the first jet appears, then another, unmarked, Israeli, fast. No warning, no communication, just the roar of their engines, and then napalm. It hits like a curtain of fire, dropping across the Liberty's deck, searing men where they stood, charring steel black. Then rockets, then machine guns. Then strafing runs up and down the length of the ship. According to Jim Smith, a damage controlman, says it felt like they were taking turns, like one would fly in, open up, peel off, and the next would just come in right behind it. The first two strikes decimate the bridge, the antennas, the communication gear. All radio towers are destroyed within seconds. 4 50 caliber deck guns are obliterated. According to crew testimony, they had 4 50 calibers meant for pirates, not jets going 600 miles an hour. So they were defenseless, and they were picking us off. Men who had been sunbathing were burned alive. The air filled with the smell of fuel, scorched flesh, and melted deck plating. According to a survivor's testimony, the napalm had burned and scorched almost the entire front part of the ship, the bridge area. The top side of the ship was no longer navy gray. It was black and blistered. They weren't just firing at the ship. They were hunting men. Crew members tried dragging bodies back below deck. The firefighting teams used their own shirts as bandages, and some men were too charred to move. More crewman testimony states that we'd jump out of cover to fight the fires, and the jets would just simply circle back. We'd yell down and duck again. That was the rhythm. Fire, duck, pray. And somewhere on the bridge, the radio crew tried desperately to call for help, but there was no help coming. Lloyd Painter, quote, they were jamming our tactical frequencies. That was one thing. But they were also jamming international distress frequencies. And that is a war crime. Not only was the Liberty being attacked, she was being isolated. According to Phil Turney, quote, who else would even know those frequencies but an ally? The jamming was surgical, precise, intentional. It meant one thing. This was not a mistake. This was a planned destruction. So men scrambled to battle stations that no longer existed. Fire suppression teams rushed forward. Blood ran in rivers below deck. Every corridor echoed with screams and shouted commands. According to survivor testimony, there were men standing 5 minutes earlier who were now dead. Bodies without heads, legs missing, people screaming from behind sealed doors. The fuel barrels on the deck erupted. Smoke poured into the ventilation systems. Men began smashing open sealed equipment to destroy classified data. Right? It's an intelligence ship. It's what they're tasked to do. Shoving tapes, cables, and printouts into the trash bags, fire hoses, anything they could use to keep American secrets out of enemy hands, because they felt they were going down and would be captured. NSA crewman Bryce Lockwood quotes, "You don't want to destroy the intelligence you've just worked so hard to gather, but you do it. Because if you don't, and they board us, it's over." Another eyewitness account states, "I ran to the drinking fountain to get water, and the basin was filled with blood. And when I looked down, a dead man stared at me. His face was reflected in the pool. I can't forget it." Men were dying at their stations, and still, the jets kept coming. At 2:03 p.m., Israeli command issued new instructions to their pilots. Use a more effective weapon. So the second wave of napalm is unleashed. By now, the deck is already scorched, but this napalm is dropped directly near the bridge where crew were using wounded bodies as human shields to protect the only remaining navigation lines. According to Phil Turney, the smell of flesh, the sound of screaming, and every time we thought the run was over, yet another one came. Even the life rafts had been destroyed in the blast. More survivor testimony claims, "I saw one burning. The canvas melted before it even touched the water." The attack had gone on for now nearly 15 minutes, with no ability to return fire, no working radar, and no radio contact. The men were being exterminated. But then, a spark of resistance. One antenna. One. A whip antenna that hadn't worked the entire cruise was found to have a single bullet hole. Somehow it might still work. According to crew testimony, radio man Terry Halberdier ran a coaxial cable across the open deck under fire to connect it. He was hit by shrapnel doing it, but he got it working. He sent the signal. Rockstar, this is Firefox. Under attack by unknown air and surface units. Need immediate assistance. That was the USS Liberty distress call. The 6th Fleet, 500 miles away, received it. So did Israel. Within minutes, the jet stopped. But the next phase was already in motion. Phil Turney, quote, "We thought it was over. We were wrong. We hadn't even seen the worst yet. Coming in from the horizon were 3 Israeli torpedo boats. Fast, direct, and heavily armed. And unlike the jets, these bore the Star of David. And that's when we knew it was Israel, and they were not here to help. They were here to finish the job." So, when steel groans like an animal, when seawater turns black with memory, that's when you know you've passed the edge, and what comes next wasn't chaos. It was execution by precision. So at 2:35 p.m., Israeli torpedo boats, 3 of them, now bore down on the Liberty. Each carried multiple torpedoes. Each one knew exactly what the target was. One survivor account stated that they had buzzed us all morning. They knew who we were. The audio tapes later confirmed it. But here they came. Fast, deliberate, weapons hot. And now the planes had softened them. Now the boats would deliver the death blow. 5 torpedoes fired. 4 missed. 1 did not. Bryce Lockwood, U.S. Marine Corps, quote, "The torpedo hit the room I was in. We were thrown into the air. The entire ship lifted, and it crashed back down like a dying beast. The blast had ripped open the starboard side, blowing a hole 39 feet wide by 24 feet high. It struck the NSA intelligence compartment where the translators, cryptologists, and top clearance personnel were located, almost like they knew they had to hit that part. 25 men were killed instantly, not wounded, not burned, not shaken. Obliterated." So the sea poured into the Liberty like a judgment. Rooms that had echoed with Morse code were now flooded crypts. Keyboards, typewriters, and bones floated side by side. Those who survived the initial blast had seconds seconds to escape. According to survivor testimony, it filled with water that fast, totally black, totally filled with powder and oil. I had to swim underwater just to be able to find air. And more eyewitness account. I reached the drinking fountain, put my hands in, and came up with a handful of blood. According to Phil Turney, my friend Ronnie Campbell had a desk right there. He sat down as the attack started, put paper in his typewriter, and said, "Dear Eileen, you won't believe what's happening to us." Then the torpedo hit, and he was gone. There are some deaths that echo louder than others, some goodbyes that never get to finish. Ronnie's typewriter was recovered, half a sentence typed, ink smeared by blood and seawater. Now, as if to remove even the illusion of mercy, the Israeli torpedo boats then circled the wounded ship and opened fire again. This time, the armor-piercing machine gun rounds. According to eyewitnesses from the deck crew, quote, "They started machine gunning our ships. I personally saw them target the life rafts." And from multiple survivor reports, quote, "They machine gunned the life rafts in the water and the ones still on board." One raft, launched as an emergency fallback, was strafed and set ablaze before it even drifted away. One crew statement quoted stated, "We were trapped on a dying ship, surrounded by an ally who had become a predator. Bullets shredded the hull. Books on the bridge were found with bullets lodged inside them after passing through metal, glass, and paper." One crew description is quoted as saying that the holes looked like you peeled an orange. Just steel, split wide open. One of those bullets killed Seaman Francis Brown. He died instantly, just 18 years old. There weren't enough helmets, not enough stretchers, not enough places to hide. And one survivor quote states, "It was like sitting in a cardboard box while someone unloaded a machine gun." And still, they fought to save each other. Phil Turney is quoted as saying, "Doc Kiefer had both legs wounded. His stomach was torn. He wrapped a life vest around himself to hold his guts in, and then stood for 17 hours during surgeries without anesthesia." I hope that man got a Medal of Honor. I don't know if he did or not. In fact, I don't even know if he survived. But that is an amazing, heroic feat. One sailor was cut open to relieve internal bleeding. And according to the eyewitness, we tried to rub his feet, talk to him. He asked, "Do you think I'm going to live?" And I had to tell him no. They sewed him up, and he died minutes later, and they moved on to the next broken body. By evening, the Liberty was taking on water, listing badly to starboard, and the crew rigged counterflooding to keep her upright. Every hour felt like the last. Phil Turney again is quoted as saying, "I thought the ship was going to roll. It leaned hard, and then it just stopped, like something held it in place." Yeah. Our God in heaven above. It's the only thing I can think of. In fact, later, he does say that something he would say later on was that it was the hand of God, because if the Liberty had gone down, no one would have known. No tapes, no testimony, and no truth. Just 294 Americans erased. And then whatever story they wanted to tell you about it, right? One crew member's reflection is quoted as saying, "I still feel them with me, the ones we lost. I talk to them when I walk. I remember them when I smell seawater. We didn't die that day, but we didn't come home completely either." So it wasn't the torpedoes that broke them. It was the silence that followed. The kind of silence that only comes from the top. From the men in suits who calculated that truth was more dangerous than murder. And it was just after 2 p.m. when radio man Terry Halberdier sent the Mayday. Remember from earlier? Rockstar, this is Firefox. Under attack by unknown air and surface units. Require immediate assistance. Well, it reached the Sixth Fleet, 500 miles away. It also reached the Israelis. That one scratched Bill Titana, rewired under fire, saved what was left of the crew. On the USS Saratoga, U.S. fighter jets were scrambled to intercept the attackers and protect the Liberty. They were armed and airborne within minutes. One eyewitness states, Captain Tully, a decorated World War II veteran, gave the order himself. The planes were in the sky, loaded, fast, and angry. But before they ever reached the horizon, the call came from Washington. Turn them back. And they did. President Lyndon B. Johnson was quoted as saying, I don't give a GD if those sailors die. I am not going to embarrass my ally. According to multiple Navy and NSA officials, he was quoted as saying that. And that quote wasn't whispered. It wasn't misheard. It was repeated under oath, printed in reports, and burned into the memories of men who never forgot it. You ask anybody who's a survivor, they would tell you the same thing. So LBJ knew. In fact, I'm certain he orchestrated it with others. And at that moment, no one aboard the Liberty even knew who was attacking them. But the president did, and instead of defending them, he covered it up. Then came something surreal, something out of a theater of cruelty. Israeli helicopters approached the damaged ship. One hovered low above the scorched deck. Her body still lay in pieces. And then it dropped. A brown paper bag. Inside, an orange, a business card, and a note that read, Do you have casualties? As if they didn't know. And it landed next to a severed leg. And according to crew testimony, it was obvious we had casualties. There was blood everywhere. Flesh in the seams of the deck plating. The fact they even asked was offensive. Yeah. And a joke to them. So the bag was handed to Captain McGonigal, bleeding, wounded, still upright. He read the note, looked up, and gave the Israeli helicopter the finger. Probably the best response you could really come up with in a situation like that, right? So, sink the ship back in Washington. Things were moving fast and dark. As always, declassified documents later revealed that some U.S. officials proposed sinking the Liberty altogether to prevent reporters from seeing her condition. According to NSA files and under an FOI or FOIA release, there was talk of towing her out and scuttling her at sea. Why? Well, because the photos, the scars, the bullet holes, the flag with 2 bullet tears would have exposed the lie. It wasn't a case of mistaken identity, which was the narrative at the time. It was a premeditated act, and if the American public saw it, the entire U.S.-Israeli alliance might collapse. Right? So they went into domestic damage control. While the Liberty drifted, burned, bent, and broken, the press back home was met with silence. Survivors' families were intercepted by government officials. Patricia Blue Rishakis, a widow, said, When I got home, the National Security Agency had people waiting for me. They told me not to speak to anyone, and they stayed at my house for days. The press blackout had already begun. Interviews were blocked, reporters were denied access, wounded sailors were guarded in hospital rooms. They put guards at the doors of wounded men. No press, no interviews, just silence. As the Liberty limped towards Malta, trailing smoke and salt-soaked grief, the U.S. Navy faced a nightmare. Hundreds of wounded sailors, dozens of dead, a crew demanding justice, and a government trying to disappear the story. And when Admiral Isaac Kidd boarded the ship for a so-called investigation, the crew thought they'd finally be heard. But they were wrong. He took off his stars and said, "Pretend I'm your dad. Just tell me what happened." Well, they told him everything. The attacks, the jamming, the life rafts, the fact that they were left there all night by our U.S. military for 17 hours, probably hoping they would sink and die, when they had ships close enough to get there far quicker than that. They had to survive that whole night for 17 hours. with no help. But then he got in our face and said, if you ever repeat this, I'll make sure you rot in a prison or worse. That was stated by Phil Turney. And that was the Navy's investigation, a veiled threat and a forced silence. That night, the ship rocked slowly in the dark sea. Captain McGonagall, bleeding from his leg, steered by the stars, no working instruments, only celestial navigation and sheer will. Below deck, Doc Kiefer was still operating. Survivors were still holding IV bags. Blood was still pooling in the corners. So this was betrayal at every level. Betrayal by an ally, by a president, betrayal by the brass, and yet the crew held the line. They patched the steel, they sealed the leaks, but no one could patch the silence from our own government and allies. And then we had a cover-up, blackmail, and the price of silence. Some betrayals are loud, with smoke, steel, and screaming. Others come in silence from a desk, a memo, a handshake. This is what betrayal looks like in a tailored suit. So after the Liberty limped into Malta, battered but afloat, the U.S. Department of Defense moved very quickly, too quickly. The official Navy Court of Inquiry, the investigation that should have shaken Washington, was completed in just 20 days. Yeah. Rushed through with spelling errors, took no testimony from Israeli personnel, ignored completely key witness reports, and ultimately exonerated Israel without serious investigation. They completely ignored the testimony of the people who actually were there and survived it. Lloyd Painter was quoted as saying, looking back on it, it was a total sham. None of my testimony was recorded. I gave it, but it was erased. One survivor's account stated that I submitted physical napalm residue in a sealed jar. It vanished. No record, no mention. So the plan wasn't just to minimize the damage, it was to bury it, according to declassified documents obtained through the Freedom of Information Act. There was open discussion about blaming Egypt, declaring it a fog of war error, sinking the Liberty to eliminate physical evidence, and most importantly, silencing the survivors. So the word came down. You are, quote, you are not to speak of this, not to your family, not to the press, not to anyone. And at first, Johnson leaked. At first, there was hope. President Lyndon B. Johnson himself leaked the truth to Newsweek magazine off the record that Israel had knowingly attacked an American ship. But then the Israeli lobby struck back. And according to the State Department officials, Israeli diplomats warned that accusing Israel publicly of such an attack would be perceived as blood libel. Blood libel, the ancient anti-Semitic myth accusing Jews of murdering innocents, was used as a political weapon. They threatened to, 1, destroy Johnson's presidency, 2, label him anti-Semitic, and 3, turn Jewish donors against his 1968 campaign. Nothing changes, does it? I mean, same thing still happens today, right? So, according to NSA Director Admiral Bobby Ray Inman, it was political blackmail. They knew Johnson was deeply tied to Jewish support, and they knew how to squeeze. But Israel didn't stop at threats. They also offered a deal. So Israeli forces had captured Soviet surface-to-air missiles during the war, and these were the same weapons killing American pilots in Vietnam. So Israel offered them launchers, warheads, and manuals to the U.S., and in return, they expected us to play nice, to shut up, to bury the Liberty, according to former State Department Intelligence Director Tom Hughes. And the U.S. did. We accepted the missiles, we rearmed Israel with fresh weapons, and we watered down the investigation. And the press was silenced on command. As usual, they're not reporters. They're CIA assets, Operation Mockingbird. They do what they're told. They read the script. So behind the scenes, Israeli agents and lawyers, many with deep ties to U.S. officials, began contacting journalists. Stories were killed, headlines were softened, and editors were warned off the story. According to State Department files, Quote, the Israeli embassy coordinated a campaign to get Johnson back into their corner. Public outrage had to be stopped before it began. So a coordinated blackout descended. And the fact that the most decorated crew ever was ignored. And so what of the men who survived? They became the most decorated crew in U.S. Navy history for a single engagement. 1 Medal of Honor, 2 Navy Crosses, 38 Silver and Bronze Stars, and over 200 Purple Hearts and citations. But instead of honor, they were given secrecy. According to Phil Turney, when I got my Purple Heart, it was in the captain's office. No ceremony, no press. They told me, if you ever tell anyone how you got this, we'll court-martial you. Gosh, how considerate, right? After the hell they went through for over 17 hours. They were all, by the grace of God, alive and survived it. Captain William McGonigal, bleeding from his leg, had steered the ship through fire and nightmare, and he was awarded the Medal of Honor. Now, traditionally, it's presented by the president in the White House in front of cameras and family, and there's a big to-do about it, but not this time. Johnson refused to meet him, and the ceremony was held quietly at the Washington Naval Yard. No press, no coverage, no speech. According to one survivor's account, Johnson was 4 miles away that day, handing out diplomas to school kids. An internal memo advised, due to the sensitivity of these awards, they should be given by the Department of Defense, not the president. So the message was clear, right? You may have survived, but you are inconvenient. So they weren't just covering up an attack, they were paving the way for future alliances, future wars, and future manipulation. In the aftermath of the cover-up, Johnson signed a classified agreement with Israel called Stone Ruby, establishing an ongoing high-level intelligence sharing arrangement, and it remains in place to this day. One crew member stated that this wasn't justice, it was betrayal sealed with ink and silence. So there are smells that never leave you. Not blood, not seawater, not death. The Liberty survived the attack, but her soul stayed in the sea. In Malta, when the USS Liberty finally reached it, she was barely afloat, listing hard, hull torn open, deck charred, top secret equipment melted to slag. But still, she didn't sink. And that was the problem. One crew member was stated they wanted her at the bottom of the ocean. Instead, she limped home, bleeding and inconvenient. Inside the hull, just above the waterline, was the NSA operations room, the room where 25 men had been vaporized in the torpedo blast. That compartment had been sealed during the journey to keep the ship from sinking. Now, in Malta, they opened it. As soon as the air hit the bodies, they began to rot. Fast. Too fast, according to Phil Turney. What they found inside was not just death. It was fragmented, unrecognizable, decomposing carnage. Bones, flesh, blood, caked papers, twisted metal, all floating together like a vision from hell. One survivor was quoted as saying, "The Navy was more concerned with getting back the equipment than recovering the men and their bodies." That's amazing to me. Is that not amazing to you? I can't even believe that. More interested in recovering a bunch of a bunch of equipment than the dead bodies. I mean, you'd think they could just take a look at it and see that it's a total loss. But no, they looked right beyond all that carnage in some sort of cold, calculated, I don't know. It really is disgusting to me what these guys went through and how they were treated like they literally meant nothing. Literally meant nothing. And all of these guys, to me, are heroes that survived. I really don't know how they survived it. So sailors were ordered to go in with gloves, buckets, shovels, And according to one crew account, you couldn't separate the bodies from the parts from the machines. So we just started shoveling, and they filled 168 body bags. Some held entire torsos, others just fragments. It wasn't triage, it wasn't forensics, it was just basically a cleanup. Within days, a crew of 300 Maltese workers was brought in. They worked 2 shifts a day, 7 days a week, and their orders: cut out the worst blast holes, weld fresh metal over the scars, fabricate new panels to hide impact sites, and then paint the ship top to bottom in a single day. According to the crew, we looked like nothing had happened. One sailor described it like preparing a corpse for an open casket funeral, makeup over trauma. One eyewitness was quoted as saying, "We looked like a ship coming back from training exercises. The press would never guess what we'd just been through." So when the Liberty returned to U.S. waters, the media were, of course, waiting, but not for answers and not for justice. They were shown a ship that had been scrubbed, repainted, and scrubbed again. One survivor's reflection stated, "The real ship never made it home. The press saw a prop." So, the Navy immediately split the crew, sending the wounded to different hospitals, the uninjured to scattered posts. According to Phil Turney, we were scattered all over the world, so we couldn't talk. We couldn't compare stories. We couldn't tell the truth together. Some men woke up, guarded by Marines, not to protect them, but to control what they said. So Captain William McGonigal, who had been critically wounded, never left the bridge. He literally steered the Liberty by the stars, bleeding and barely conscious. The ship's systems were down, her instruments destroyed. There was no GPS, no guidance, just celestial reckoning and raw resolve. The guy is a hero. One survivor was quoted as saying that McGonigal bled through his trousers, through the floor. He never once stepped away. Back home, widows were met not with comfort, but with handlers. Yes, our favorite, right? Handlers. They were NSA people in my living room, and they told me not to talk to the press. Yeah. And I didn't. They stayed day and night, according to Patricia Blue Rishakis. Some families received compensation, but not all. When Israel was finally pressured to pay reparations, it offered $6 million for the ship, which was valued at over $17 million, $25,000 to widows, $10,000 per child over age 5, and nothing for children under 5. The U.S. government claimed they couldn't comprehend grief. Wow. Is that lame or what? So the Liberty was eventually sold for $100,000 to a scrapyard. So they scraped her name from the hull, but you can't erase what was done. 1,000 coats of paint are not going to change the smell of blood in the metal, and they tried to hide the wreckage. And again, like I said at the beginning, this was not fog of war. This was calculated. Every move timed, every witness silenced, and at the center, a hill overlooking Syria, soaked in politics and blood. June 1967. The Six-Day War had begun. Israel was crushing Arab forces. Egypt's air forces destroyed. Jordan pushed back. Gaza and the Sinai under control. But there was one holdout. Syria, specifically the Golan Heights. And what we're getting into here is some of the real reason the Golan Heights and that this took place and the price of looking away. So, a fortified plateau towering over northern Israel, the high ground. Whoever held it held dominance over the region. Israel wanted it. But the U.S. had warned them not to take it. There was concern it would trigger Soviet intervention. Dean Rusk, U.S. Secretary of State at the time, was quoted as saying, "We made it clear, do not expand the war into Syria." And then, just as Israel was about to move on the Golan, the USS Liberty appeared off the coast. The Liberty wasn't there by accident. It was collecting electronic intelligence, eavesdropping on Israeli, Egyptian, and Syrian communications. It had NSA linguists fluent in Arabic, Hebrew, and Russian. They weren't just listening for military moves. They were looking for violation of ceasefires, war crimes, unannounced troop movements. And according to James Ennis, the officer of the USS Liberty, we were tasked to monitor any escalation beyond the approved boundaries. Well, on June 8th, just hours before Israel's push into Syria, the Liberty would have heard everything. And so what the Liberty might have caught was Israeli troop deployments near Syria, orders for artillery movement, the false narrative that Syria attacked first, possibly even U.S.-made weapons being used where they shouldn't be. And that was unacceptable. An NSA analyst in a declassified interview states, if the Liberty picked up proof that Israel planned to seize the Golan, it would force Washington to intervene or risk losing credibility in the Arab world. So Israel made a choice. Silence the Liberty. And then we have these tapes that never aired. Ambassador Arthur Goldberg, the U.S. representative to the United Nations, was livid when he found out about the attack. He demanded access to NSA recordings of Israeli communications made that day because, here's the shocker, Israeli pilots were recorded saying, "It's an American ship. It's an American ship." And the reply, declassified in an NSA summary FOIA release. All they got was, "You have your orders." These tapes were buried and only summarized in redacted memos. On June 9th, just one day after the Liberty was nearly sunk, Israel invaded the Golan Heights, and Washington, it looked the other way. George Ball, former Undersecretary of State, quoted as saying, "By removing the Liberty from the equation, they cleared the airspace of witnesses, and they secured the narrative and the hills." A week before the attack, CIA officials had drafted a memo. It warned that the U.S. should be prepared for an incident involving Israel and advised on damage control. In some CIA archival notes, it stated that there's a pattern to these briefings. We were preparing to apologize before anything had actually happened. And when the Liberty was attacked, the official line was already, "It was a mistake. The ship was misidentified." Right. Or my favorite, fog of war. Right. After several passes, waving at the pilots, seeing the giant, larger than normal holiday flag. So, why did Washington go along? Because the Cold War was on. Because the U.S. wanted intelligence cooperation, access to captured Soviet technology, continued dominance in the Middle East oil trade, a stable regional partner against communism, and because some truths were just too costly. Right? And they say every war has a cost. But what about every life? When the Golan Heights were taken, the truth about the Liberty was taken too. And time does not erase betrayal, it buries it, unless someone keeps digging, right? And over half a century, not a single hearing. Decades since June 8th, 1967, the United States Congress has never held a full public investigation into the attack on the USS Liberty. Not one. No committee summoned survivors, no subpoenaed communications, no floor debate, no apology. According to Phil Turney, one of the survivors, we were sacrificed, then ignored, and then erased. Requests were made, letters were sent, petitions filed, veterans begged to testify. But the doors remained shut. Every attempt to reopen the case was quietly killed, often by the same committee members who accepted donations from pro-Israel lobbying groups. That, according to a former Pentagon analyst. So for years, the Liberty crew lived under threat. Many were forced to sign non-disclosure agreements. They were told, you speak, you're court-martialed. You talk, you lose your pension. You go public, Your family's at risk. But some spoke anyway. And good for them. I admire their strength and their not being afraid. And maybe they were afraid. We all get afraid. But you don't give in to the fear. You do what you got to do anyway, right? Ernie Gallo, a Liberty survivor and founder of the Liberty Veterans Association, was quoted as saying, "I'd rather die broke with a clean conscience than live rich with blood on my silence." Good for Ernie. I'd like to meet the guy. So the association was founded in the 1980s. Its goal, tell the story no one wanted told. They collected testimonies, published books, pushed for hearings, and of course, were ignored, ridiculed, or labeled conspiracy theorists or anti-Semites. Some tried to crack the silence. Ray McGovern, a former CIA analyst, called the Liberty cover-up the clearest betrayal in modern U.S. military history. James Bamford, author of Body of Secrets, obtained NSA documents proving Israel knew the ship was American. Christopher Ballin traced the blackout to Zionist lobbying power and paid a professional price. Peter Hunham, a British journalist, was detained in Israel for trying to interview whistleblowers. Ray McGovern is quoted as saying, "The moment you speak about the Liberty, you're told to sit down, shut up, or you're called something far worse than wrong." Any political figure who raised questions, even gently, was met with threats of donor withdrawal, letters from the Anti-Defamation League, accusations of anti-Semitism, or media editorials dismissing them as conspiratorial. That's become their favorite, right? Anything to mock or dismiss or to shame somebody into silence. Paul Finley, former U.S. congressman, is quoted as saying, "We've created a climate where truth is treason if it questions the wrong flag." Well, that singles out Israel. I would just say, I would change the quote if I could, saying, "We've created a climate where truth is treason if it questions the elitist narrative." Because it's not really about American or Israel, but I'll get to that. Now, in recent years, over 500 documents related to the Liberty attack have been declassified, and they confirm that the U.S. knew within hours that Israel was responsible. Of course they did. This was so scripted and plotted. I think they knew even before the radio signal by that hero that repaired one of the antenna even got out. And I think, honestly, it's thanks to that man that they're all still alive. Because if he hadn't got that message out, they would have done even more to sink it. But that limited their options. And now, everybody heard, It also confirms that pilots identified the ship correctly. And we have audio tapes for it now. Johnson and McNamara stopped military rescue not once, twice, and left them sitting in the ocean for 17 hours. My guess is hoping they would go under and drown and kill all of them, and so they wouldn't have to deal with them. The NSA had intercepts proving Israeli intent, and it also confirmed the cover-up was planned and maintained with help from U.S. officials. Admiral Thomas Moore, former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, said, "We knew it was deliberate. The evidence wasn't ambiguous. It was overwhelming." Unbelievable. 34 men died that day. Their names are etched into a memorial in Arlington, but nowhere in the official record are they described as victims of friendly fire or worse. One Liberty survivor was quoted as saying, "I buried my friend. They called it an accident, but I was there, and I can still hear the screaming." The ship's bell was restored. A few documentaries were made. Some historians whispered the truth, but there was never an apology and never a full reckoning or accountability. So this is the part where we ask you not just to remember the Liberty, but to understand what it meant. That when truth is inconvenient, it is hidden, and that freedom, the kind we're dying for, must never be quiet when truth is wounded. You should stick up for it in any way that you can, even if it's something as simple as sharing this video so that people find out more about this or look into it. And like we said before, time does not erase betrayal, it buries it, unless someone keeps digging, right? And it's just amazing. I'm still stunned at what everybody went through that day. And that they survived even 17 hours at sea when they were hoping they would drown. Anyway, I really want you to think about these guys and the fact that they were silenced. And don't let yourself be silenced. You get the word out there. You can either share this video, look into it, but these guys need to be remembered. I wish I could reach out somehow and have one of them on the show so you could hear that before these guys pass into obscurity or pass away. You know, it's not like they're getting any younger. So before we close, let's make one thing very clear. This is not about hating Israel, and it's not about hating America either. It's about knowing how this game is rigged and who's playing chess with the blood of nations, right? The Liberty wasn't attacked by a rogue pilot or a navigation error. It was a coordinated decision carried out with military precision. And sealed with diplomatic silence, but those orders, they didn't come from Tel Aviv, not really. And they didn't end in Washington either. They come from somewhere higher and far older. Groups like the Committee of 300 that we're discussing right now in our series that I'll continue next Monday. The Black Nobility, bloodline bankers, secret lodges, ancient brotherhoods. These are the shadow architects, and they don't serve nations. They use them. Their loyalty isn't to flags or nationalities, it's to influence, ritual, and the long game of global control. Israel? Used. America? Used. Soldiers die, civilians cheer or mourn, but the same hidden hands move the board. Left hand, right hand, the same mind commands them both. So it's not really about blaming Israelis or Americans, it's about recognizing that leaders take orders and the people pay the price. And so why are we mentioning this now? Well, because it's June and we're right around the time of the anniversary of the Liberty attack, right? And we're hearing whispers again, right? Iran. Tensions are rising. Missiles, Navy drills, talk of retaliation, warnings of sleeper cells. Mass numbers of tanker aircraft heading in that direction. So you have to ask yourself, who benefits if something unthinkable happens on U.S. soil and Iran is blamed? And who profits from a new war? Who gains more control over speech, travel, spending, and freedom? And who gets to redraw the map? False flags don't just justify wars, they construct reality itself, if you haven't noticed. Maybe not right in the moment, but they set the foundation for being able to change everything. So is it so hard to imagine that we get a sudden incident at sea or a cyber attack traced to Tehran, a strike on American soil during an election cycle, or Israel pleading for help, or, in the U.S. reluctantly stepping into a global inferno, all while none of it serves the people, only their plan. And that is why we tell the story of the Liberty, not to stay in the past, but to be observant about what's going on right now and into the future. Because Monday, we go deeper into the lodges, into the bloodlines, into the real war, the war behind all wars, the seed war. And we need to stay awake and stay armed with truth and remember the Liberty. Right? Clearly, some sort of false flag event to sink an American Navy vessel on purpose for whatever their ultimate goal was. I don't know if it was to start a global conflict or to silence something the Liberty had. Who knows? Either way, they always lie to us about it, and you never get the real story in the official narrative. Not until decades of digging later. So, if you served, if you know someone who did, ask them about the Liberty. If you're a teacher, include it in your curriculum. If you're a journalist, which there are few today, and most of them are people like myself, George Hobbs, and others who go out there and look this stuff up and feel convicted to share it so that others know about it, so the truth doesn't just stay buried under a rock. We are going around walking the long road I talk about that goes ever on, like Tolkien wrote, and lifting the rocks and discovering things and telling you about it. And all we ask is that you like, subscribe, and share it with others so that they'll know about it too. Right? If you're a citizen, never let silence be for default, because silence doesn't protect peace, it protects power, right? That's why they try to silence us. They tried to sink the ship in the story, but we are still afloat, according to the USS Liberty Veterans Association. And so, fellow travelers, the tale is told, the lamp is dim, and the road behind us winds long through shadow and silence. But before we part, there's rest to be had at the inn where truth is poured like fire-warmed mead, and questions are welcome at every table. So stay a while with us, let your mind settle, let the burden of knowing ease, if only for a moment. But when dawn breaks, we rise again, not to retreat, but to climb to the watchtower. For the road goes ever on, and there are still warnings to give before the veil is torn wide. So subscribe, share the tale, join us again next Monday as we leave the firelight and dig deeper into the architects of war and deception, the kind of architects that plan things like the USS Liberty. So the road is long, but the truth is worth the walk, is it not? I think so. And I am thankful for all you listeners. Remember, we have shows Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, all at 9 p.m. Central is when they're generally released. Sometimes there's glitches. Sometimes, like last Friday, I'm so exhausted from work, I fall asleep. But I will always get that episode out and apologize for the times that we have boo-boos or, me being a goofy head and falling asleep. I hope you all enjoyed my Father's Day song. It wasn't really necessarily a song that I wrote specifically for Father's Day. It was an instrumental that I did for our upcoming album, The 12s. And every time I'll play it, because I'm not necessarily done with it, I want a little bit more of an intro. And I'm thinking about extending it a little longer, but this is the demo of it so far, a working demo of it. And if you want to check it out. Oh, and one thing I should mention is I accidentally on YouTube uploaded the wrong video. So it should really only be 3 minutes and 30 seconds long. But the video I had of me in studio sitting down and recording some of the takes of the tracks was like way at the end as I was trying to put the video together. The video contains some AI imagery of my father ascending into heaven and seeing heaven and so on and so forth from his hospital bed in the VA when he passed away two Father Days ago. I mean, he didn't pass away right on Father's Day. It was just before Father's Day. But this is our second Father's Day without him. And every time I play through the track, it reminded me of that. So I wanted to do a video about it and put some pictures of him up there because he was a naval corpsman and a darn fine one. And so I think he would be proud of this episode to let people know about the guys in the military that, they don't ask for this. They do what they do for love of their country. And what a darn shame that the leadership doesn't have the guts to stand up to these people with money and power that tell them what to do. And I'm sure they do it out of fear of threats of death to them, their families, and so on and so forth. But if they can't kill us all, folks, if we just stand up to them, stand up to them. Ask for help from the Lord Jesus, right? I mean, what's the worst thing you could happen? You die and you're with the Lord Jesus, right? So I say stand up to these people and tell the truth. Get it out and don't worry about it. Don't be fearful. And if you feel a spirit of fear, cry out to the Lord because he hasn't given you one. And he will calm it and let you get through it and do what you got to do. So with that, I will wish you all a good night. And the band will play you out for the evening in the inn. Good night, everybody, and have an awesome work week.
Gather round, ye travelers, lend me your ear. A tale of heroes who knew no fear. Through shadowed woods and mountains steep, their legacy lives where the wild winds sweep. Raise your tankards high and sing for the grey pilgrims and what they bring to every corner. Their stories stay. Hail the chronicles of Pilgrims Grey. Through cursed lands where few would tread, the brave walk forth where many fled. Lanterns lit the endless night, their spirits burned a guiding light. Raise your tankards high and sing for the grey pilgrims and what they bring to every corner. Their stories stay. Hail the chronicles of Pilgrims Grey. The laughter fades, yet echoes strong in every heart. Their timeless song, mirrors carried on the ale-soaked breeze. Songs as endless as the trees. Raise your tankards high and sing for the grey pilgrims and what they bring to every corner. Their stories stay. Hail the chronicles of Pilgrims Grey.
Having a life scholarship and being able to afford to go to college made me feel inspired to go.
When I got a life scholarship, it was such a relief.
I knew that I wanted to have an impact. Having a life scholarship through the SC Education Lottery was huge. It gave me the opportunity to make that impact right here at home.
The South Carolina Education Lottery. A better you, a better us, a better South Carolina. Visit sceducationlottery.com/betteryou.
Ready to make a real impact every day? Join the Active Day Home Care team and help clients maintain their independence in the comfort of their own homes. Make a difference in someone's life as you provide essential daily assistance and protect their health and happiness. Earn up to $20 an hour and enjoy additional perks like optional daily pay, 401k, paid time off, ongoing educational training, and more. Join a team that values care, compassion, and your professional growth. Visit activeday.com to apply.